Alright, so we're still talking about decimals, and now we're talking about dividing by a decimal. So basically what you're doing is you're dividing a decimal by a decimal. So this would look like, if I was to write this problem out, it would look like 1 2/10 divided by 2/10. Now the problem with decimal divided by a decimal is that we cannot divide with this decimal point right here. So what we have to do is we have to make these into whole numbers, or at least make the number here a whole number. In order to do that, you have to multiply, and when you multiply, whatever you do to one number you have to do to the other number. Okay, so we're going to multiply by 10 because we need to move it over, move that decimal place 1/10 spot. Basically is what we need to do. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 1.2 times 10. 0, 0, 0, 2, 1. Decimal point out, in. So the 1.2 multiplied by 10 becomes a 12. And 2/10, oops, make that, multiplied by 10, 0, 2, 1 out, 1 in, becomes 2. So really what we're looking at here is 12 divided by 2, because we're multiplying these two numbers by 10 to move the decimal point, to move it over so that we get whole numbers that we can divide by. Now we can divide. I can divide 12 divided by 2. No problem. 12 times 6 equals, or 2 times 6 equals 12. 0. My answer is 6. That is how we divide a decimal by a decimal. You take the number, you multiply it by however many place values you need to move it over to make that number a whole number, like the 2 here. So let's do some examples. Here we have 2 1/10 divided by 7/10. How that looks is 2 1/10 divided by 7/10. We have to take that number. The number on the outside needs to become a whole number. This number can stay a decimal, but whatever you do to both one number, you have to do to the other number. And so what I mean by it could stay a decimal is, let's say that there was a 2 here. If I multiply this by 10, this moves over 1 and this moves over 1. And there's still a decimal place value in the number, and that's okay. We just need to make sure that the number out here is a whole number. So let's multiply these by 10. Now, there's a quick way to do it, and there's the long way to do it. And the quick way to do it is just know that when I multiply this by 10, this decimal is going to move over right here, and this decimal is going to move over right here. So they're going to move to the right, each one place value. Or I multiply it out. Either way, I get the same thing. So this becomes 7. And then I take 21, 2 1/10 multiplied by 10. Becomes 21. Either way, I can do the math, or I can just move it over. But if you just move it over, the thing is I want you to know why you're doing it. Okay? Or how you're doing it. It's not just that, oh, because there's a decimal point here, I just have to move it over and then move this one over. I mean, that is the case in a way, but you need to know that the reason why you're doing it is because you're multiplying it by 10, both numbers by 10, to then move the decimal over. You're not just moving the decimal over. Okay, you're multiplying it to move the decimal over to make this a whole number so that you can divide. And then we'll divide 7 times 3. My answer is 3. Take a look at this one. Oops, don't need to rewrite it. That way, we'll say multiply this by 10. If I take 3/10 multiply it by 10, I get 3. If I take 6 6/10 and multiply it by 10, I get 66. divide it. 3 times what number equals 6? 2. Bring down the 6. 3 times what number equals 6? 2. 0. My answer is 22. Let's do another one. We have 3 and 60 hundredths divided by 1 and 2 tenths. Now here's an example of what I was talking about earlier. There is another digit here, well, another place value, which is the hundredths, and even though there's no value here, it's a 0. If there was a value here, like a 1 or a 2 or a 3 or a 4, then you'll see exactly what I'm talking about in just a second. I have to multiply these by 10 because I need to move this place value over 1. So I multiply by 10. If I needed to move it over 2 places, then I'd multiply it by 100. Or 3 places, by 1,000. So, if I multiply the 1 and 2 tenths by 10, I get 12. If I multiply the 3 and 60 hundredths by 10, I get 36.0, which is basically 36. And I really then just could drop this off. But to show you that the decimal could still stay there, let's keep it there. So we need to go 12 times what number equals 36? 12 times 3. Bring the 0 down if I want. This is going to go in 0 times. Still going to get the same answer, which is 3. That is basically what we're going to be doing. All it is making sure that when you divide divided by a decimal, that the number on the outside here is a whole number. And in order to do that, you multiply it by the place value that needs to be moved. So, or by the number that needs to be, the number of zeros that need to be moved, basically, is that if I need to move it over 1 place value, I need to multiply it by 10. If I need to move it over 2 place values, then I multiply it by 100. And whatever I do to the number here, I have to do the same to this number on the inside as well. And the decimal just needs to disappear for here to make it into by making it into a whole number. And the decimal here can stay, but if it also multiplies out, then that's fine as well. And then you're just dividing basically a number by a number like you've normally been doing. So all it is preparing for that, preparing the decimals to move so that you can divide a whole number by whole number is basically what we're going to be doing. If you have any questions, write them down. I'll help you in class.